X. We know Malcolm X. You've heard of him before. This guy developed, this is a guy who never got a formal education. He got his education in prison. And he didn't go to prison to get education. Prison wasn't trying to educate him any more than we're trying to educate you. Why did he tell him to copy the dictionary? Because words matter. And you can only think in a language that you've mastered. This is fantastic because whether you agree with this or not, I mean, it's provocative either way, because there would be people who will go their whole lives and they're always asking why, like a 5-year-old. And some people ask that question just because they really just want to mess with you. And then there's some people who ask that question because they really want to know, like why. They want to know the explanation for things. They want to know the answers for things. I think it was Friday night. I went to this taco place down in Imperial Beach. Oh man, I was trying to remember the name of it because I was going to tell you guys about it because it was a former student from here. He used to sell tacos over at Machete in the parking lot. And then he got kicked out of there. National City said there was some ordinance from like the 19th century that said he can't sell tacos there. Real thing, by the way. And so he ended up just moving to Imperial Beach. And it was this great thing because he got there. It wasn't one of my students, but I knew of him. And he was kind of running around busy, him and his wife, and he was saying, yeah, we moved in here and we're expanding out. So they're like expanding way past their original little stand. And then they had an opportunity to open up another place a few miles away. So he said, so I only had this one project, but now I'm doing both. In other words, he's expanding massively, really quickly. So getting kicked out of Machete for him was like, this is my whole business. I built this thing here. And then he ended up taking a spot in Imperial Beach just because that's the only thing that was available, way far away from his normal client base. And now he's growing, his problem is he's growing too fast, or he's too big and he's trying to handle it all, which is a good problem to have. But anyway, I was sitting there and just staring. And my friend asked me, what are you staring at? Because she knows me well enough. And I'm looking at the back of this, like the unit where they have like they keep some of the food in there, it keeps it cold, I guess that's the way of putting it. And then right next to it was the stove, the where they're cooking, the oven, stove, right? Am I confusing you? Okay, good. I feel like I'm confusing myself. And I'm looking at the back of it, and you see the wiring and everything. And I was telling her, think about that. Like, that was someone's life work. Someone poured their whole life into developing the wiring that feeds these things and the color coding on it. Like someone came along at one point and said, you know what we should do? We should color code these wires and make the way simpler. Oh my God, that's brilliant. That was his whole life's work. And it was feeding into a fan that would keep the stove from overheating. That was somebody else, their whole life work was making that fan. And somebody else made the contours on the fan so it would be more efficient. And that was their whole life work. And these are people that if I asked you what their names were, they couldn't tell you. But there was somebody who slaved away in his garage his entire life while he came up with this one thing. And he'd be like, that's right, I'm the father of the contoured fan. And we're all like, whatever, can I get some more tacos? But you look at all of the pieces of equipment that are fueling this business, and all of it is someone's life work. It was a person who was just like curious, like, can I make a better fan? Can I make better wiring? Can I make it better this? Can I make it better that? And all of it feeds up like a pyramid. And there's one guy now who has all this equipment. He's wondering, can I make a better taco? He can, by the way. The guacamole's really bland. I'm going to take my own salt and pepper next time and just when it's not looking, just mix it together. There's a few things in life I do really, really well. Only a few. One of them is to make guacamole. But that's my life work. Guacamole. No, but that's someone's life work. All of these things that feed into a person then who takes all of this stuff together, and all of it is fueled by this curiosity of, can I make something better? Which first you have to first recognize that there's something that is deficient. You know what I mean? Like you don't just make a new fan and the contours in the fan unless you recognize that there's a design problem with the old one. You don't do anything in your life unless you recognize that there's something deficient that could be fixed. You don't take a job and then move up to another job, to another job, to another job, unless you recognize that there's going to be something that's going to be better about the next level. because the next level is going to mean more responsibility, more work, more everything. And so you have to recognize that first off, it's possible first off, you have to recognize that there is something that's deficient. And then, but that's really characterized by the awareness that there's something that could be better. You know what I mean? This is where I was taking that big dump last period I was talking about. Where I feel like I know what it is. How do you know that, if anybody in here is poor, if I were to ask you, how do you know you're poor? How do you know you're poor? Yeah, because you see a comparison to other people. You wouldn't know that you were poor unless you saw rich. You go back, and right now we're looking at ourselves, we're like, I'm very poor. If I say, well, if I were to take you back to the 15th century, I mean, nobody wants to go back that far, but then you would realize, wow, I'm rich, but that bridge word compared to that 15th century person. But that's the thing that brings about, in other words, it takes tremendous imagination and a comparison to even realize that something could be better. If you can see two things next to each other, then you know this is better than this. But if you don't have that, if you just have this thing, to be able to have the imagination to say this could be better, takes a lot of imagination. It takes a lot of ingenuity. And I would say that it takes genius to be able to do that. You know? And so, going back to our stove here, if I were to, we have this idea of thrill and experience and destruction. If I were to ask you, again, what are the things that you have to learn for yourself versus, and why do you want to learn those things for yourself? Going back to what AJ was saying earlier. So stay with me for a second. The stove is hot, yes? Now, how long does it take to get that feedback that the stove is hot? If you take your hand and you touch the stove, how long does that feedback take? Right away, seconds. So do you know the stove is hot?
Yes.
Yeah. So now you know not to touch the stove, right? And so if I were to tell you, even as a little kid, hey, we'll give you $1, go touch the stove. Okay. Because, you need those in the world. Now, pretty quickly, the kid's going to realize $1 is not worth it, and he gets that feedback immediately. Okay. So far, so good? All right. If you go to the gym today and start working out, how long would it take for you going consistent, say three days a week, how long do you think it would take for you to start to see the physical changes in your body?
6 months.
6 months?
A year?
A year, depending on your body type. I promise you'd start seeing it within weeks. 2-3 weeks, the most. 3 weeks. Especially if you work on things for your shoulders, you'll start to see that definition in your shoulders pretty quickly. Way faster than what you would think. So what that means is you'll be walking out of there, you'll see the mirror, and you'll be like, in the mirror. Now, what that does now, that tells you this is only like 2-3 weeks. Imagine what 2-3 months will look like. In other words, you're getting that feedback relatively quickly. Not as quickly as the hot stove, but you're getting it relatively quickly. So far, so good? So don't touch the stove, it's bad for you. How do you know? Right away, you know. Exercise, work out. You'll feel better about yourself, you'll improve. How do you know? 2 or 3 weeks. Okay, not too bad, you can do that. All right. Study hard, gain wisdom, it will improve your life. How long does that take to get the feedback on? Yeah, exactly. Who knows if you ever even will. But that's the thing. Immediately, well, who knows if I ever will? Even if everybody in the world's telling us, God, this will develop your mind. It will make your life better. Yeah, but you won't know for 10, 15, 20 years. Okay, read this book. Don't go to the party. Read this book. It will change your life. Okay, let's go to this party right now. Oh, you see? This will improve your life in 10 years. This will seemingly improve your life today. So which one do you go for? And by the way, I'll leave it to you. That is a real question to ask yourself. Which one do you go for? And I think I know that the answer to that for most of us is this one. For many of us, it's the immediate thing. For most of us, the long term is like 2-3 weeks. But the really actual long term in terms of life is unimaginable. I mean, think about that. We're asking you to do something at 18 that will improve your life in 5 to 10 years. which is half to double your conscious life, because you've only really been conscious the last 10 years or so, like in terms of like thinking about things outside of yourself. So this is an incredibly long bet to put. So when we're telling you, develop your mind, you can understand it theoretically, because you can see how, wildly successful people who will tell you that. But how old are they? They're pretty old, man. They're like, maybe twice your age or so. In terms of how old that is going to be a relative thing, of course. But my point is just that when we're being asked to put off the immediate gratification for the thing that's going to help us long term, you can't really see how it's going to help you. Like if I were to tell you, study poetry. Why? It's going to improve your life. If I tell you guys that, I wonder how many of you will sit there and go, okay, I can see how poetry is going to improve my life. I wonder how many of you sit there and shake your head and go, bullshit, you have no idea what you're talking about. Even if I sit here and tell you, I can tell you how it will improve your life. Will reading poetry improve your life? Yes, 100%, no doubt. Everybody, not me, every single person. Reading and understanding it will improve your life in dramatic ways. I promise you that. How many of you believe it though? How many of you, if I tell you, I don't know, touch the stove, it'll burn, you believe that? Yeah. It's the ability to understand, to believe both of them, because and that's why it's important to have people around you who you can trust. You can have, you can find the stove thing out for yourself, 100%, but wouldn't you rather trust me on it? If I walk over to the stove and go, oh my God, you can see the the blisters forming on my hand, and putting it under the cold water, and just I turn to you and go, do not touch the stove. You might be like, okay. Because even if it's not immediately affecting me, you can see how it affects another person immediately. But being able to see this long term, you have to have people around you can trust. In this case, you can see that I touched the stove, so you trust me because you saw me do it. You're not really trusting me, though, you're trusting yourself. If I'm telling you right now, get your diet better, not even like fixed entirely, but just better, and then go to the gym 2 or 3 days a week for 2 or 3 weeks, man, I'm promising you, you trust me enough to do that? It's $10 a month, man. It's a big investment. Now, do you have anybody around you who you can trust? I'll get you. Do you have anybody around you who you can trust that they tell you, do these things, that you'll trust them just as much as if they tell you not to touch the hot stove? Just as much as if they tell you to try exercising? Or do you have nobody around you? If you don't have that, that means that you don't have a mentor or a guide. And it's worth getting that. Even if it's not going to be somebody who stands in front of you. Maybe somebody that's online that you can look at. A professional that you can like follow, you read their books or something, Yeah. And you look at the really good ones, I mean, even if you look at a guy like, not a rapper, but a speaker, Malcolm X. We know Malcolm X. You've heard of him before. This guy this is a guy who never got a formal education. He got his education in prison. And he didn't go to prison to get education. Prison wasn't trying to educate him any more than we're trying to educate you. But what he did was have a mentor who told him, go copy the dictionary. So if I told you guys, go copy the dictionary, I wonder how many of you would be down to do it. Or if you just copy paste the dictionary and go, just did it. Why did he tell him to copy the dictionary? Because words matter. And you can only think in a language that you've mastered. You can't think about something like mitosis unless you have the word mitosis. Once you have a language to describe it, like I was just talking to, last night I was doing this jiu-jitsu class with this guy, Conrad. I shouldn't say his name. I'll say his name anyway. He'll never see these. I hate Conrad because I think I've mentioned him before. He's tall, nice, talented, just hate the guy. I keep calling the cops to tell him he's transporting drugs, but they're not busting him for some reason. So I guess the cops in Chula Vista just don't care. But anyway, last night, I mean, we're talking about how to take up, these takedowns. We worked on takedowns the whole night. And there's something that's so simple. He just said, obviously, when you're taking this person down, you're just trying to get their hip to the mat. And even in wrestling, if you think about that, you're trying to get their shoulders to the mat. So for some reason, like you're trying to put a person on the mat, you would think just slam them down on the ground. Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, that's what you're looking for. But how do you do that? Well, if you can get their hip on the mat, that's how you do it. And so we were focusing on just putting the hip on the mat. It's something I knew intuitively, but as soon as you took that idea and you put words to it, then you made it clear. And once you made it clear, now you had a goal to go towards. So everything I was doing the whole night was just trying to put hips on the mat. It's not anything different from what I was doing before. It's just more precise. And so it changes the way that you approach it. It's difficult to explain, but if you understand, you understand. There are things in life that as soon as you give them words and you give them shape, now you can understand the concept and the principle behind it. Now you know how to pursue it. The other day I was talking in this class about what love is. And if I were to ask you what love is and you had no idea what it was before, then you'd just been like, it's like a, I mean, you know? No, I don't know. What do you mean? Because you love buffalo and you love your mom. What do you mean? But as soon as you understand that it's to desire and seek the flourishing of another, the well-being of another, now you can sit there and go, oh, this person who I'm with right now, do I actually desire and seek their flourishing? Or do I just like the fact that they buy me stuff and make me feel special? In other words, it's not really how you feel about them, it's about how they make you feel. Then you don't really love them. You just love the way they make you feel. And so what that therefore means is that this person's probably not the right person for you. But then I don't want to give up the cool stuff and the way they make me feel. Okay. But all I'm saying is that now you know if you're in love with them or not. Now you know if you're in love with them or if you just like the thing that they give you. And that's a very different thing, of course. And by the way, you can also realize it in reverse as well. But it's having that idea put to words that then gives us a way to compare things to it. You know? And so once we have the ability to compare it, now we have the ability to make sense of it. So why does Malcolm X copy the dictionary? Because now he knows the words. Which words? All of them. Literally, all of them. All of them. So if you're trying to, play with the language with him, he can call you out on it. He knows it. Now, how much time would it take you to copy the dictionary? A long time. Of course, Malcolm X was in prison for years, so he had the time. He had the time. Now, Malcolm X going to prison, was it the worst thing that ever happened to him? No, probably the best thing to ever happen to him. As he says himself, he probably would have died from an overdose or something, by his own admission, if he hadn't gone there. Now, if I were to tell you, hey, you're going to prison, it's going to be the best thing to ever happen to you. Really? In 10 years, you're going to be, world famous and blah, blah. You're going to be changing the world in 10 years. Can I just touch the stove and find out right now? So it's that ability to think long-term and to plan long-term. And even if you can't think long-term or to plan long-term, to have somebody who you can trust that can point you in that direction, that you can sit there and go, you know what? I don't see it. I can't see it for myself right now, but I'm going to trust that it is the best way. And maybe even a negative role model. In other words, you can see people in your life who didn't do that and see where they are. It's that comparison. But it's true that it's consequential, that we behave in ways that are guaranteed to make us unhappy. How much of our food comes from cellophane? And we know that's bad for us. And how many of you guys drink soda? It's terrible for you. You know this. What do I drink 90% of the time? Diet Coke, and the other 10%? Coffee. Yeah. And so will I ever go to the doctor and be like, cancer? But how? Yeah. And you recognize that you can't, that's the goal, to never be touching the stove, to always be, always be developing your mind. But, I don't know. Diet Coke is tasty. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? All right. Better than second period. So that'll tell you how bad second period was.